Welcome into the second Whole Hog pregame show. Seth Campbell joined alongside Scottie, Bordelon, and we're going to get you ready for all things Arkansas and Auburn. First, starting off with the Arkansas Razorbacks. Well, the Razorbacks are coming off of a huge win, Scottie, over Mississippi State. Is there any worry that after a huge win like that, you break the losing streak, that there might be a letdown coming into this Auburn game?
I think there's certainly some worry among the fans because they don't want to see Arkansas just go out and, I don't know if waste is the right word, but just have an immediate letdown, kind of like Mississippi State had after they beat LSU. You go back home and lose to Arkansas. But Sam Pittman's been asked about this a number of times this week, and what he goes back to is they have the 24-hour rule. You celebrate the win for 24 hours, but once it's Auburn week, you have to flush the Mississippi State win. And Sam Pittman has said that the coaching staff has moved on, and the players typically do what the coaches do. So I think he's been pretty pleased with the way his team has moved on to Auburn.
And then looking at the injuries on both sides of the ball, offense and defense,
plenty of them.
That's going to be a big key for the Razorbacks. What's your concern level for those guys?
Yeah, I think I'm not exactly sure if you're going to get much, if anything, from Rakeem Boyd this week. We had heard earlier in the week that he was at practice, but he was not participating in practice. There's a big difference in being at practice and actually, participating. So that's a little bit of a concern for Arkansas's run game. But you feel like you got a pretty good night out of Traylon Smith in a kind of an emergency role, I guess you could say. He played pretty well. He led Arkansas in receptions, actually, and then almost ran for 50 yards. So played pretty well. I think the two bigger keys in terms of injuries are with Traylon Burks. I think he's hands down your best playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. He's great after the catch. He's big, strong, fast, got really sure hands. If he's able to go, I think that obviously that gives Arkansas's offense a boost. And then, on the defensive side of the ball, Busta Brown is a guy that you really don't want to go into this game without, because Auburn's got a couple of really good receivers in Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz. You figure he's probably going to be matched up on one of those two guys. I figure you put Jerry Jacobs on one and Busta Brown on the other, and that's kind of the key to slowing Auburn's passing game. Is according to one analytics site that I look at, Bo Nix, I think he's thrown around 65 or 66 passes this year, and 42 of those have gone either to Anthony Schwartz or Seth Williams. So limiting those two guys is going to be big. Having a guy like Busta Brown not only available but healthy, near 100%, that's going to be huge.
On defense, Arkansas had basically one game plan: rush 3, drop 8. Now it's a lot more complicated than that, right? But from a layman's perspective, that's basically what Arkansas did on the defensive side of the ball. You're not going to be able to do that against Auburn. What do you want to see from the Arkansas defense?
Yeah, they've got to continue to be aggressive, and I think you've got to continue to be really sound tackling in space, because what Auburn's offense wants to do is throw the ball laterally and get their playmakers in space and try to make guys miss and pick up some valuable yards after catch. And Arkansas, they've got to be sound defensively in terms of tackling. And then I think another thing is, Arkansas has shown in the first couple of weeks that they're pretty good at, when a ball carrier maybe is stood up but his forward progress hasn't stopped, they're pretty good about trying to go in and rip that ball out. We saw that with the Kylan Hill fumble that actually wasn't technically a fumble.
Right.
That was a big play. And then Jalen Catalon kind of did the same thing in week 1, and Miles Slusher came away with that fumble recovery. But I think if Arkansas can get pressure too on Bo Nix, he was not good against Georgia facing pressure. I think he was like 26% on passes behind the line of scrimmage last week against Georgia, and then just really was not efficient at all facing pressure against Georgia. That's not to say Arkansas is probably not going to get the same type of pressure on Bo Nix that Georgia did. But I think you might be able to force him maybe into a mistake or two, if you get to him fairly consistently.
And then players to watch out for, one on offense, one on defense for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Yeah, a guy on defense that I'm pretty high on right now, and Sam Pittman is too, is Zach Williams. And I wrote a story on him this week that's live on our website right now. Zach Williams played last year. He played quite a bit last year as a true freshman. He was a little bit undersized, but he had 12 tackles all of his freshman year. Through 2 weeks this year, he's got 13, and he's got his first career sack. So he's been pretty productive for Arkansas on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe he can make some things happen. I think with Dorian Gerald, he's in line to possibly be a starter at that jack position. He earned his first career start at Mississippi State last week, and I think came away with 6 tackles. So ran to the ball really well. They really like his motor. On the offensive side, I think you just want to see if Traylon Burks is back to himself. He went out in the first half of the Mississippi State game with a knee injury, had an MRI the next day. Haven't really gotten much of an update on his status, but Sam Pittman, I think, expects him and Busta Brown to at least be able to go out of those 3 injured starters. So just because I think Traylon Burks is the kind of playmaker that can really hurt a team like Auburn, especially maybe down the field with some yards after catch too. And if he can break one, that would obviously take a little bit of pressure off of Felipe Franks too. So having your top playmaker is going to be big.
He's a game changer on the offensive end for sure. All right, Scottie, time for score prediction. Nobody on our short history here on the WholeHog pregame show has ever picked Arkansas to win a game. Will you be the first?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Arkansas on defense, and I think that facing Chad Morris's offense at Auburn, which hasn't really gotten off the ground through 2 weeks.
You could say that. I
think some of those guys like Joe Fouché, we talked to him this week, and Greg Brooks, they're kind of really antsy to get on the field with an Auburn offense that's led by Chad Morris. But I don't know that Arkansas's offense is going to be able to really get off the ground too. And then you maybe factor in the weather. The passing game might not be as effective and precise as you want it to be. So that's kind of, I don't know if that makes Arkansas one-dimensional. And you could be going into that without your top tailback too. So I think this might be a week that Arkansas struggles on offense. I think it'll be a week that Auburn continues to struggle on offense. But I think Auburn's defense maybe comes up with a score that might decide this one. So I'll go with Auburn 21, Arkansas 13.
Low scoring affair for sure, and might have to do something with a little bit of a rain. That's always a possibility, although the storm, Hurricane Delta, continues to shift further and further away from Auburn, Alabama as game time nears. Well, stay with us because coming up, we will have Matt Jones dissecting the Auburn offense and defense. Welcome back into the WholeHog pregame show. Seth Campbell and joined alongside now Matt Jones. Matt Jones writes the scouting report for Hogs Illustrated, and he has scouted the Auburn Tigers, so we'll get right into it, Matt. What have you seen from the Auburn offense? They've kind of been the talk of the town of the Plains anyway, and how really they haven't performed. What do they need to do to get going against Arkansas?
Well, I think they can get their run game going. When you look at Gus Malzahn's teams over the last several years, they've always ran the ball well. They've always been at the top of the SEC in rushing yards. What's been underrated at Auburn has been how good the offensive line has been. And it's a lot different this year. They've got 4 new offensive linemen. They lost J.B. Grimes, who was their longtime offensive line coach. And so they haven't been able to run the ball nearly as well this year. They had 29 yards, I think, against Kentucky in the opener, 91 against Georgia last week. Those are very, unlike Auburn stats. I mean, typically, even when they face a good defense, you're still seeing Auburn run for, anywhere in the vicinity of 140, 180, 200 yards. So you haven't seen that, against a couple of good defenses to this point this season. Like I mentioned, the 4 new offensive linemen, they've got to get, more cohesion along that offensive line. But for them for the Auburn offense to work, it's always been about being able to stretch teams laterally to the sideline, and then that opens up the middle of the field for some of those big plays, so their receivers or tight ends or maybe a running back coming out of the backfield. And they haven't had the run game to really open that up this year.
And then looking at their offensive coordinator in Chad Morris, how has he influenced the Auburn offense?
I think it's hard to say just because we're only 2 games into it, and I think that their inability to run the ball has probably affected what they're doing a little bit more. It looks like they're throwing the ball more with Bo Nix. I mean, this is, a team that may throw it less than 20 times a game last year. They're throwing it a lot more than that this season. But I really think I think that this is Gus Malzahn's offense that Chad Morris is calling plays from. Yeah, maybe Chad Morris has put in some wrinkles to it, some of his own thoughts, some of his own plays. But by and large, this is still that hurry-up, no-huddle offense that we've seen Gus Malzahn run all the way back to his days as a high school coach in Arkansas. That's been his bread and butter at Auburn, and I can't see them going away from that, even no matter who the offensive coordinator is.
On the other side of the ball, though, the Auburn defense has had its ups and downs this year.
Mm-hmm.
What will be their game plan to stop the Arkansas Razorbacks?
Well, I mean, I think that they're going to have to take away the passing game. Arkansas hasn't shown the ability to run it in the first two games, and granted, some of that had to do with Georgia being an elite defense. Last week, Arkansas didn't have Rakeem Boyd for the majority of its game at Mississippi State. That changed, I think, what they wanted to do offensively. Auburn's really good on the defensive front. Players like Tyrone Truesdell as their defensive tackle. Big Cat Bryant is a veteran defensive end for them. There's some injuries that are, you're going to have to watch for Auburn defensively. KJ Britt, their leading tackler at linebacker, there's no guarantee that he's going to play in the game. That might change things. But I think if you're Auburn, if you can take away Arkansas's passing game right now, I know Arkansas wants to work off the run game to set up the pass game, but right now the run game is not working for Arkansas. And so if they can take away the pass game, Arkansas is going to have to show that it's improved quite a bit in the last week in the run game. Otherwise, I think they're going to have trouble moving against Auburn. I think they're going to have trouble moving against them regardless. But if Auburn can take away the pass game with the struggles Arkansas has been having to run in the ball, then I think it could be a long day for Arkansas.
It always seems like it's a coach's game plan to make a team one-dimensional, whether that is passing the ball or running the ball. That way you don't have to worry about the other threat. And that definitely seems like it could be a key for Auburn as well. Players to watch out for, one on offense, one on defense for the Auburn Tigers.
Well, because I don't know if KJ Britt's going to play on defense, I would say the player is Tyrone Truesdell. We saw Georgia have a lot of success a couple of weeks ago with that 3-4 defense. Using their nose guard to clog up the middle for the Razorbacks. Tyrone Truesdell is a guy that I think could do that for Auburn. And then offensively, they're missing a lot of players right now. We don't know if Sean Shivers is going to play for them. They're running back, a couple of receivers, Seth Williams and Eli Stove are questionable for the game. And so the guy I'll go with is Anthony Schwartz. Anthony Schwartz is an Olympic speed type sprinter. I mean, this is a guy that was a medalist internationally in junior games when he was 17, 18 years old. And so he's shown the ability to really hit the sideline and go if they can get it there. How can Arkansas set the edge? We've seen Auburn have a lot of success running to the outside, throwing quick passes to the outside against Arkansas. The Razorbacks cornerbacks haven't tackled well in this game the last few years. And so a guy like Anthony Schwartz, I think, could be a key. How can they defend him? Because if you let him go, then all of a sudden what should be maybe a 5-yard gain becomes a 30, 40-yard gain in a hurry.
Good stuff. And then also Auburn has a kicker that is pretty good as well.
Yeah, Andres Carlson, part of the Carlson family legacy kickers for Auburn. His brother Daniel was the kicker for them for 4 years, and then Andres has been for the last 3 years. So Carlson has been their kicker for the last 7. This is a guy who, he can really boom it. Sends a lot of kickoffs into the end zone, but he's also a guy that has shown the ability to make it from 52, 53 yards for a field goal, really reliable on extra points. And so he's a wild card, and I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's got the potential to be a close game, I should say. And I think, when you have a close game like that, it comes down to some of those things like who's got the better kicker, who holds on to the ball better in the rain like we're expecting to see. And so I think Andres Carlson could definitely be a big factor in the game.
All right, and then last but not least, Matt, we got this hog hat right here for you. What is your score prediction? Are you going to put that hog hat on and make some hog fans proud?
I'm not going to put the hat on, but I am going to pick Arkansas. I think Arkansas's played better than Auburn through 2 weeks. Maybe I'm a little influenced by the Mississippi State game last week and how poorly Auburn played against a really good Georgia team. But you look at what Arkansas. Let's just pick the Arkansas-Georgia game and the Auburn-Georgia game. Auburn played Georgia closer from a final margin, but I think Arkansas played Georgia better if you go back and you just watch the 2 games and how they kind of unfolded. And then you just look at, statistically, Arkansas 4.2 yards per play against Georgia's defense, held Georgia's offense to 4.3 yards per play. Auburn just 3.4 yards per play against the Georgia defense, and Georgia averaged 6 yards per play offensively. And you can get kind of in trouble comparing stats and comparing scores like that. But based on the eye test, what we saw Arkansas against Mississippi State and Georgia, and Auburn didn't play very well in the season opener against Kentucky either. Kentucky had a couple of fumbles in Auburn territory that the Tigers scored on late in the game to kind of pull away in that one. I think Arkansas has played better than Auburn to this point, and I think that confidence is a heck of a thing to have, and momentum is a great thing to have, and Arkansas's got both of those things going in there, and I think they've got a chance to pull the upset.
Well, Matt, you made history. You're the first person on the Whole Hog pregame show to pick the Razorbacks to win. And this hog hat, it looks awfully inviting to put on, but I'm just going to have to sit it on right over here. I think that the Auburn offense is going to figure a few things out, and Arkansas's offense is going to struggle to score a little bit. Compared to you and Scottie's scores, I got a little high scoring game in 31-21 in favor of Auburn, but it definitely should be a good game. And what's something to look out for is that you don't expect Arkansas to get blown out like they have been the past 4 years.
Yeah, that's the key. They've lost the last 4 games by 157 points, 53, 32, 31, 41 points. It has been all Auburn in this series the last 4 years. And so, can Arkansas keep it close? I think they can keep it a lot closer than that.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Whole Hog pregame show. We'll be back next week to preview the Ole Miss game, so you can subscribe wherever you are watching us right now, and you'll get this in your notifications. That way you won't miss a Whole Hog pregame show. Well, for Scottie Bordelon and Matt Jones, I'm Seth Campbell saying so long, and we will see you back here next week.